Well, this week we're going to talk about decision making, and I want you to just tell you right off the bat that it's actually a skill that we can hone, we can get better at. I think if we look at it and evaluate it, especially after we've done a little bit of it, and most of us at this point in our life have done a lot of it. Some of them have led us down the wrong path, and we've had to reverse. We've had to get back, and we've had to go a different direction. And I think that's a really, really important thing is that, hey, listen, life is a little bit about trial and error. And but we can do a couple things. We can be intentional. We can evaluate what we did and where we've been. And we can also, just like any of these other skills, we can take a look at what other people or how they function in order to get where we want to get. Especially, decision making has everything to do with your mission and your goals and reaching them. And those people that are highly successful really can teach us a lot. I've gone through a lot of trial and error types of things, and we all do. Don't try to say that we haven't, but I'm not in that boat. If you're perfect, then I'm glad you are, but I'm certainly not, or have not been in that role. But I've got the slides. They're available to you if you want to go through them individually. But I'm going to run through them as quick as I can. I know this is probably going to get a little longer than I'd like it to, so I'd like to get started as far as that goes. So. This is kind of how, if you're going to implement the scientific method, we would identify and define, identify alternatives, collect data, analyze the alternatives, and make decisions, implement the decision, monitor and evaluate the results, and accept the responsibility. Would be straight out of the regular old business book that we might have grown up with, or maybe even took another course. And it's not all bad, but as I got into business and started doing some reading and following some people that seemed to just have an edge on what I was doing, they weren't quite doing this exactly like this. And so anyway, hopefully this makes sense. Let's talk about this a little bit more. As it says in the slide, that this is kind of the old school, maybe, but maybe not, because others have kind of got this thing figured out. Not that that's a bad way to think about it, but it's hard to. My brain doesn't work that way. So throughout the processes and different decisions and big ones and little ones, as far as decisions go, they didn't exactly work that way. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So anyway, the discussion that's going to be ongoing throughout this period is going to be a little bit different. Maybe you can pull those slight differences in places, big differences in others, that will help you along the way as you proceed and make some bigger decisions as you get on with your businesses, as you get through school and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, hang on for the ride for a little bit. I like the fact that to ask myself some basic questions throughout this process, more than the step-by-step type of process. And the first one would be, does having a mission statement affect your decision-making process? And as we went over in your mission statement, and hopefully at this point you go, oh crap, I've got or crud or whatever, you go back and you revisit those mission statements. Do you have them memorized? They're all about your skills, passions, and your vision, and they're your core belief, your values. So they should actually be very well ingrained in the decisions that we make. And as we get a little older, I think probably it makes it a little bit easier because they're those are the things that establish who we are. So anyway, and they provide those guardrails where, if we're headed one way, in a general sense, that, if we're asked to make a decision that are way out of bounds, we can basically say no. And the huge thing, as we brought out when we built those mission statements, was that they allow us to say no. And that's huge. They make the decision-making process so much easier if we've got actually some clarity on where we're going. And many decisions are already made, so it makes it somewhat easier. So, Chapter 4 in Entree Leadership talks about, the oxymoron of a indecisive leader. Well, are you a leader if you're indecisive? Let me ask you that. That's kind of, if people are following you, you can't really be a leader if nobody's following you, okay? So leaders are somewhat, they're proactive and they're decisive in their mannerisms. Indecisive organizations leads to paralyzed organizations, and certainly we can't have that. We've got to be shucking and jiving. There are times to just wait and be patient, but there are also times to move also, because there'll be opportunities that present themselves, and you either have to go for it or you don't. And most of you, I'm sure, certainly realize that. Clarity in the mission leads to a well-greased organization where there's always questions within an organization, but there's far less doubt within the people that you're leading if you're a decisive leader. And indecisive, in the classroom, I ask my students, you ask yourself at this point, have you ever worked for somebody that's indecisive? It's very frustrating at the very least, and you don't know what's expected of you next, and that sort of thing. Maybe you can think of a few examples of this kind of thing, and again, it's crippling to a business. So anyway, 3 steps to make great decisions, and there's parts of them, so I'll break them down for you because I like to eat this elephant, one bite at a time. But take time proportional to the impact of the decision. And I was talking about this in class the other day. If you're going to go from, if you're in the livestock business and you've got a commercial cow operation, and you've decided, you had a vision, you had a dream overnight, and you're going to go to a strictly pedigree operation that's selling production bulls to commercial operators, or maybe getting into the show business with some of your genetics and that sort of thing. That would be a big decision, a big move. Do you have all the skills and tools in place in order to do that? Now, I'm one that you have to get started at some point, and you're going to learn some of those things as you go along, but you've got to acquire some things before you get started too. So you're going to actually take time, proportional to the impact. If it's a small decision, it shouldn't take you much time. If it's a huge move out of your comfort zone, maybe even a change to your mission, then you're going to take some time in proportion to the size of that decision. So that one, I'm sure, seems fairly obvious. Most of us, just being honest, most of us can be procrastinators, and most of you have identified that about yourselves. And I'm no different than you are. I've got a couple of things on my plate right now that it's like, it's not that. I'm just not wrapped into that too much until the deadline comes, and then I really work my tail off in order to get it done. So, but avoid procrastination as much as possible. Get things done as they come along that you can do. always think about it. If somebody sends me an email and only requires me a couple sentences or a sentence to respond to them, I do it now because I'll forget that one for sure. And so anyway, that's just an example. There's many, many of them in our lives that we have to make out through the day. And you become a business leader, you'll make those. And so first of all, in order to avoid this thing called procrastination, is set yourself a deadline. Some other people may set it for you, but try to make it so you get it ahead of what their deadline is when you set your own deadline for these certain decisions. This pushes us to make the decision and do things to make that decision. So we're not sitting there idle. And that's the key here, is that we don't just wait till the last minute. School may be a prime example for a few of you. It's like the assignment isn't due till Friday, so we don't jump on here and look at what we have to do for the week. And so we end up just cramming it into Friday and wonder how much of it really sticks. And we all get caught in that. So you're no different than anybody else. It's just that sometimes, if you're a leader, you can't run by the seat of your pants very effectively. Another great way to keep from procrastinating too much is to share it with others, have an accountability partner that keeps you honest, so to speak, on these certain things, and so they can jab you a little bit and say, hey, listen, did you ever get that done? Did you ever make that decision? Did you ever implement these procedures? Those kinds of things can make a world of difference. And it's just no different than having a workout partner when you're trying to get back in shape. There's some mornings you don't want to get up and do your 3-mile run, but you got somebody that's knocking on your door saying, hey, listen, are you ready? Those things go a long ways towards us actually doing the work. So the third thing is, if you've got some time, and we should, again, take the time if it's a big decision, is we don't sit there idle. We gather our options. Information happens to be the greatest thing that we have. And most of us, because of the internet and the contacts we make, and I would actually put more weight towards people that have actually gone through what we are, rather than the actual internet. But we can do a lot of background stuff so that when we contact people that have been through those situations, we can ask the right questions of them. It'll just make the decision-making process so much easier, provide some clarity, always jumping back and taking a look at our mission and goal so that we haven't gotten sidetracked in all of this. Maybe the decision's already been made, quite possibly. So gather those options. Use that time that you have. Okay? So this is one little quote here that I try to live by, and you might see yourself in a little bit. But operating by the seat of your pants, I already mentioned before, whether personally or professionally, leads to mediocrity, paralysis at the very best, or ruin at the very worst. Why is this true? Because I have tried it. Okay, that's not Thomas Jefferson, that's Todd Jones that's saying that. And I've heard this many, many times over my lifetime, but not quite that way. But maybe you can take a hold of this and identify with it too. So anyway, good luck with that. We all find ourselves sometimes in that situation where we've actually procrastinated. So, Jim Collins, if you want to read a couple of really good books, great books actually, Good to Great and Great by Choice. Jim Collins is a Stanford professor and has some great insights. He's really studied a lot of Fortune 500 companies and small business, all the way down to small business, and seen and tried to to recognize what are the things that really make them successful. And anyway, he describes a business as a big flywheel, giant flywheel, and each cog on there is the decisions that are made within that business over time. And generally, when we have a startup business, that flywheel is just barely moving because we don't know a lot, maybe. And we're very intentional, possibly, but slow to react to certain things. We don't have quite the skill level with people and different things that we deal with in the business. So our reactions are a little bit slower. So that flywheel is moving fairly slow, but it's moving. As we practice these skills, and again, like I pointed out at the very beginning of this podcast, is that decision making is absolutely a honed skill. If you don't practice, if you don't intentionally look back and evaluate where you've been and how you did, then it's pretty difficult to figure out whether or not you're successful. Okay, and we're trying to put more tools in our toolbox at this point and make better decisions. So with practice, you're going to get better. And as you grow, as you have more people, and you're replicating the successful decisions you've made in the past, then this flywheel starts moving a little bit faster. Maybe in a farmer ranch, you add on acreage, and you're doing more. You've got more things going under. You have more people working for you. You've had more successes, and the flywheel starts moving and moving and moving. Maybe you started putting some profits away, and you have more at your fingertips, and the business just continues to grow. And that's the kind of things that are intriguing to me as we get along in this process. So, speaking of the decisions that we make, absolutely 100% studying all the businesses, and Collins actually points this out in his book, and I can reflect back on my many years of business as well, that the decisions we make about people are by far the greatest, most important decisions that we'll make within our organization. And really, when it comes right down to it, all decisions are about people. I don't know if you agree with me at this point, but as I look back in all the things that we had to do within the businesses that we ran, that it was all about the people. It wasn't, at the times, a lot of times we thought it was just about other things that we did within the business, but it was all about the people. So, what I always like to say, and we're going to do a unit on hiring and firing, and it's mostly about hiring, by the way, and hiring well, hiring with greatness, and that's another skill. Part of the decision-making skill, by the way, is we want to get the right people on the bus. And in certain circumstances, you might not be the right person on the bus for the job. You might not be sitting on the correct seat. And I'm a big advocate for actually getting outside help, especially with small business. We wear so many hats. And in the beginning, and maybe all through that business, sometimes we take on a hat that we're not very skilled at. And many times we can actually hire that out or bring somebody in that brings that expertise and just boosts the whole business success idea. We're getting that flywheel just moving a little faster by doing that. And it may cost us, but actually the returns and the well-being actually may provide for us a whole lot more, may open a whole bunch more opportunities in that regard. So when you're a leader and you're thinking about this, getting the right people on the bus, and that involves you again, as I was talking about, getting them in the right seat is really, really important. Those are the decisions and the major decisions you're going to make as a leader in business. So, now what? Making effective decisions, okay? How do we do that? And in ag, I've seen people do it both ways. I've done it both ways as well, but I can look back on some of the major missteps. Sometimes we call them mistakes. Sometimes we stubbed our toe. There's setbacks altogether. But rather than implementing these huge decisions, especially if we don't have the skill level or knowledge in order to effectively really push for that sort of thing and actually control what's going on, I'm an advocate for actually starting small. And an example would be if you're thinking about changing to a different crop if you're a farmer, or actually farming rather than being in the livestock business. You might try it on a small scale in order to up your skills, find out whether you got a passion for them, find out whether or not you need to dig and find more knowledge, see if you need to get a few more people on the bus and the right seats in order to accomplish those things that are going to be required if you make major changes within your business. So Jim Collins, again, I'm kind of following his outline here, but he talks about firing a few shots out of the pistol. Okay, small bullets. We do a test plot here and a test plot there if you're a farmer. We start a small herd if we're going to change our genetics and breeding within a cattle herd. And we start a small operation and build off of that so we can acquire the skills required in order to effectively make that decision if we jump off the cliff all the way. So don't fire the cannonball right off the bat, because it may mean the ship sinks if you're all in. And I'm all about being all in, but until you have everything in place, it's pretty difficult to do that, and you could lose everything. And there's people that are counting on you. So I fire a few shots, see if you've got things in order, and shift and make decisions and changes that you need to do in order to facilitate those major changes, those decisions in your business. One of the things that I found interesting, I'm not a real argumentative type of person. I kind of I push back, or when there's an argument or something like that, my first go-to is that I kind of avoid that. But if you've got some people that are helping you make a decision that are passionate, all the better, actually, what I found out. And arguing has its pluses, so that you can sit back and listen to others, and then actually get started. So I'm a big advocate of actually, it doesn't have to be hollering and screaming. That could be what some people imply by this, but it's not in mine. I like to a leader will sit back until it's time to make that decision, taking that just another step in the decision-making process, getting some information, getting other people's experiences, pulling them in so that we can make the best decision possible. Okay, another question, and you notice that we've gone through a series of questions actually throughout this whole process of making better, more intentional decisions. First of all, starting out, does it even fit our mission? And then here we are. How much time do you have until your risk profile changes? Okay, if you're a farmer and planning has to be done at a certain date in the spring, then your risk profile is from now, possibly, until the planting date, or until you can assemble all the things possible that you need in order to do the planting. That could be. It wouldn't be actually the date that you would plan, but that horizon would be that time span. And then how much time before you make that decision? That would be where I'd implement the deadline process, an intentional deadline within these kinds of decisions. It keeps you from rushing if you actually think about that. Early mornings are a good time to contemplate this kind of thing. If you're an early morning person, late nights might be your forte. So one or the other, typically, where you've got some time to contemplate these sort of things. Collect that information and your options. Don't use it to be idle. Okay, this time risk profile or period. That's essential, that you're actually doing things. I mean, from the outside, somebody might say, well, he's just sitting around. But you're actually collecting that information, looking at your options, and that sort of thing. 90% actually. And this is data that Jim Collins, after looking at thousands of businesses, is actually effective decision makers. And he drilled down on this type of thing. 90% of great decisions is about gathering information. He studied some really, really successful people. And I think this is one where we sometimes we just say, well, we've heard a good idea, so we're going to try it. Okay, well, if you heard a good idea, you might research a little bit. And if it still sounds like a good idea or something you can implement, then you might actually shoot your pistol off a couple of times with some test plots and testing. And then if that looks successful, then the implementation of the actual process might go on. So very intentionally going through this kind of stuff. You'll get better at it. You get faster at it, actually, as you go along. Benjamin Disraeli, he, of course, a fellow from Israel, but one secret of success in life is for a man to be ready for his opportunity when it comes. Ladies, I'm not leaving you out here. This speaks to all of us. Certainly is. I think back, people like to, I've made a lot of horse and mule deals over my lifespan. And I remember way back when we started our business, when we had nothing, including, almost probably zero, or we were living on somebody else's money. As far as trying to assimilate a great horse herd and pack string and that sort of thing, I've actually, over the middle points to the end of my business career, have bought better and more horses cheaply than I ever bought early on. I made a lot of bad deals initially when I was forced into the purchase of those particular animals. And this is just an example. Maybe you can pull up some, but I paid way more than those animals were worth, and I made a lot of great deals for some great animals that really enhanced our businesses because of this particular thing. And one of them was that we, in fact, had the money to sit around and wait for the right animal to come along. And sometimes we didn't even need them. We actually just bought one because it was a great deal. Somebody, it was a backyard pet, or was a great animal somebody needed to get rid of. But you don't negotiate on those things, at least I don't too much. And anyway, made some great deals. And I always looked at, other people would say, they'd be paying far less for many other things too. And I'm going, how do you get those deals? Well, sometimes you just have to be set up. You have to be ready for them. You have to be really intentional about them. And you'll make those decisions if they come along. Having a little bit of a bank account actually gives you a lot of flexibility, in business. Running on somebody else's dime or being in debt certainly does not. So how do you get team members to make great decisions? And this is really a good discussion on if you're a leader. I would actually reword that. So, are you a leader? If everybody comes to you and asks you to make decisions for them, I'd say probably not. If you're a great leader, one of the things that you're going to learn is you're going to have to teach people in the early processes of their employment or while you're working for them, so that they can make better and better decisions for themselves, along the way. And this is called delegation, simply put. And how do you do that? It's one of those things that just takes some time up front, so you don't have to spend as much time later on. And as you can read this slide as well as I can. You can call it the take the monkey out of the room with you. And this is an analogy where your employees continually coming back and saying, "What do I do here? What do I do there? What do I do here?" And I mean, it really causes some chaos in your life as a leader, continually going through that. So if you can set it up for them, where you're teaching them the processes of how to make great decisions on their own and what decisions they can make, and pushing those responsibilities off on them. I don't want them to feel like they can't come to me. As a leader, you need them. You need to have the door open policy. You need to be gathering information from the inside of your organization continually. But you don't need them to make all these itsy bitsy little decisions. You want them to do those kinds of things for them. So you need to guide them at first. And the monkey in the room is they come in with a particular question that they could have made themselves, but they're not confident in making the decision for themselves. One process could be to just say, "Well, why don't you go outside and then come back in 5 minutes and give me 3 options, and we'll pick one." Okay? We'll discuss them and pick one. Well, they can do that. The next time they come in with a similar question, you might say, "Now, do you have your 3 options for me to evaluate so we can discuss it?" "No." "Well, go out in the hallway, go back to your office, get back on the tractor and think about it, contemplate it, go out for a ride, make a big circle, however you have to put it for your circumstances, but come back and give me those options, and you tell me which one you pick." See, this is a process. And it may take, everybody's a little bit different, but as they become more effective, they become more confident, they're going to take the monkey out of the room with you. And what you really want for these kinds of decisions especially is to upgrade the kind of decisions they're making within your organization, and making them as you would if you teach this correctly. So that in the end, when you've got an employee that's been with you for years, they should just say, "Hey, listen, this is what I did." And you can say, "Hey, listen, I back you 100%. Now, that doesn't mean that every once in a while you can't remind them. It's just like, I reserve the right to back you 100%, but I also reserve the right to bring you in and evaluate how it went and what we would do next time." And we can do that, and we can set ourselves up for success. Those are great things. You're gonna build leaders within your organization. One of the greatest things that happened in our business, and it's because of some of the great people that we were able to put around us, was we didn't have to be there anymore all the time, because those people were making the decisions we would have done, especially on the day-to-day type of decisions that they had to make. So it's a wonderful thing. It may not be like the sexiest subject, decision making, right? But when it's happening in your organization, something you're passionate about, it's exciting. I guarantee you. So I hope that this makes a little sense if you ever want to talk about it. That's what my hope and prayer is that you actually coach and teach your people to be good decision makers, and you become a better decision maker in that process. So here's some effective tools that we can do in order to build this decision-making process into our organization and the people. Most important thing, the people. Short time meeting. Everybody hates meetings. I do too, okay? So don't make 3-hour meetings. At the start of the day, at the beginning of the week. A short meeting, fill in the gaps for your employees so they're not wondering what's going on. And you'd be surprised. When I first started my business, I still think about it, 30 some years ago. You get less questions for one. And it wears you down as a leader. It's like they're asking questions which are not important to them. Hey, listen, why don't you just bring them all together? We used to call it a huddle. I'd do a 5-minute huddle just about every morning I was in camp with all the guys and the gals and just say, hey, listen, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen today, and this is what it looks like is going to happen the next week. Just stay flexible, guys, because it could change a little bit, but this is what I've got planned for you. So you don't have to wonder what's going on. And then, you proceed along your way. Maybe having to give out some duties, some extra time spent on some of those employees that are not as familiar with the setting and the way you do things. But make it short and sweet and make it regular so that they can count on it too, so they're kept up to speed. So, again, I'm a big, I lean hard on actually increasing my knowledge base along the way as I go, trying to keep bringing in some podcasts, sharing those with some of the other leaders within my organization is a big plus. I love to give out books to people that I've read that have affected the way I do things. The podcast things are available all over the internet. Entree Leadership, it just has information coming at you. You can read it. It's almost like a fire hose. But anyway, so lean on your consultants. You can't be the best at everything. I teach record booking, but I hire an accountant. And sometimes I don't know everything. Sometimes I've got to use some booking agents. Sometimes I have to use my extension agent. You cannot know everything and do well. So, there's a lot of free stuff out there, but don't be afraid to pay for it. Generally, you get what you pay for. So, anyway, and we're coming down to the end of this particular podcast, but decision making and getting the right people, and this one it might be a little bit out of order where we do the hiring unit, but here's some things when you're deciding on different people to bring into your organization, and you might build your questions around these particular points because they're all about making a decision about bringing somebody that's going to increase the growth rate, the profitability, the production, and that sort of thing in your business. So they're key. They're very, very important. Do they share the core values that you do? Could they fit within your mission? Would they actually take your mission and run with it? Those are kinds of things that you can build some questions about in the selection process. Most of us in agriculture actually have to hire somebody typically that's fairly independent. They're going to have to work for themselves. So will they take delegation without too much pushback? Will they want to learn and not just wanting to be fed everything from one point to the next? Are they accountable? Will they own up? Are they trustworthy? Are they honest? And fifth, I really don't want to, I can love them, I can be around them, I'll be friends with them, but if they're not passionate about what you're doing with your business, then it doesn't take on the same elements of a team that I want to build as a business, and hopefully that you want to build as well. So anyway, keep your mission statement in all this process under your belt, and out there, wear it on your sleeve, and everywhere you go. So I hope the best for you. If you ever want to talk about any of this kind of stuff, I'm always available, and this goes for during the class or outside of class as well. So I wish you the best.